Hello, and as part of our ongoing series of reports from the World Retail Congress and video interviews to really understand how retail is meeting the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm delighted to have with me Bart Denolf, who's CEO for Sacoor Brothers franchise. And Sacoor Brothers, as Bart will tell us in a second, is a very international business and in some interesting markets where we're seeing some real developments, almost the next phase of the pandemic and how business is coping with emerging from lockdowns. So, Bart, thank you very much for joining me. It's particularly interesting to talk to you and understand more about how you as a business have coped with this pandemic. Can you talk through the stages that as it impacted on your business, because this is something that moved from the east through the west and the rest of the world from there, but can you talk through the way it impacted on your business, starting, I guess, from, as you say, from your Southeast Asia businesses?
Okay, so what we have to define first is the timeline here. So if we look at the timeline, this crisis, I think, has 4 phases. The first phase is like the immediate reaction phase, the immediate reaction that is once it hits the country. The second one is the resilience phase. Then there is a third phase, which will be recovery transition, and then probably the fourth phase will be the new normal. No? So if we are talking right now about this first phase of the immediate impact and reaction, then I think in this crisis we had an advantage against other crises, and for the reason it is, we saw what happened in China, and somehow this has draw us a roadmap for us to see what was going to happen. No? So Southeast Asia was one of the first countries to be hit after China, and luckily in the beginning it didn't look that it was very contained, but then eventually it was not, just like it happened all over in the rest of the countries. And I think that maybe we had some advantage there, because we saw what happened in Southeast Asia, and we were already ready with our stores for the safety of our employees and for our customers to close them down in countries in Europe where we were still waiting for the governments to react upon that. No, yeah. I think that is the first thing.
Yeah. So what was the time period from when you could see what was happening in China and beginning to impact on Singapore, which is one of your main markets in Southeast Asia?
Look, in Southeast Asia, first it was in Malaysia and then Singapore. Both these 2 countries were hit. I think the time span was not so large. So basically, there is not so much learnings that you could take from it, because it went all quite very fast. But if there were learnings that we could take from that, for sure it was how government acted, how malls acted, and also how the customers themselves were acting. No? And things that how you had to close all your stores overnight. At one time, all the stores had to be closed down. No?
And that was Malaysia and Singapore. That's what happened.
It happened in all the countries. Basically happened the same thing. All the countries suddenly the governments have taken decisions and then you have to close your stores in a minimum of time, and it's important to close these stores properly, and a lot of brands might have not been ready to close these stores properly.
Yeah. And
you asked me also on the business on the employee side and on the business impact, which are 2 other things that I think that we have to highlight. To the employees themselves, first of all, it's very important, because this impact was both personal and professional. So it's very important that you show them very good engagement, that you are close to them, because suddenly they are at home with this insecurity. So a very clear and good and constant communication is very important. Show them trust in times of crisis. People look to their leaders, and it was very important for us as a company to show stability and trust, and that we are counting on our employees, who have always counted on us, and that we are there for them. No, I think that's very, very, very important. And then on the business impact side, in the first phase, obviously when suddenly you have 120 stores closed down, so there is no income except the online business at that time, which probably we will talk later about it. But with all this, you need to make a contingency plan. And so the business impact, in the end, you need to look at the situation is that we need to survive this crisis. And to survive this crisis, the name of the game here is cash position. So if you look at that, what we did is, first of all, CapEx. So all the CapEx investment, which are, let's say, non-essential, they were put on hold, or we moved them forward to a later time. The ones which are essential, which are the investments in technology, which now become much more important, you cannot around that, and you have to do them. Then if we go to the OpEx, here it's country by country. You need to look at what are the expectations of the sales in the next 6, 12, 18 to 24 months. No? And based on these expectations, then you will also have to adjust your OpEx. And OpEx, how do you adjust them? There are three things here. Suppliers, that's one thing. So we negotiate with our suppliers, but this time it's not a tough negotiation. It is a collaborative negotiation, because we also want our suppliers to survive. We all need to get out of this together. So suppliers is the first thing. No? Second thing is malls. Everybody is talking about what will be the new models of malls, because will it go on like this or not? A lot of people are talking that we will go to only turnover rents in the future. There are some turnover rents which are already happening. We will have to see how it goes in the future. For the immediate effect, some malls have been very proactive, and they have waived immediately all kind of rents for the next 2-3 months. Other countries, it has been done by the government. They have deferred rents. So it depends also country by country, And finally, the employees, which are the most important, which we need to maintain the social impact and maintain as much jobs as possible. So within that, again, you need to look country by country, because some countries, governments have been very proactive, and they have taken a huge stake in that. Other countries don't have these kind of policies. From our side, we have created a fund for some people who are in unpaid leave, and where we can help them somehow. So that is basically, I think, that are the points that are crucial in this first phase that we have done.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting you mentioned about how different governments have reacted. A lot has been said and written about Singapore's approach, and I know there is a second wave of the coronavirus, unfortunately, but they have been held up for a lot of praise in terms of the speed and resilience with which they approached it. What sort of differences have you seen in the key territories that you operate in?
Look, I think Singapore is indeed a particular country for two reasons. First of all, you have a very responsible society by itself. They are very obeying to the rules. That's the first part. And second, it's a country that is very advanced in smart city technology, let's say. So, which means that they somehow can control the movements and see probably much clearer than in other countries which clusters are being infected, how it's moving. So yes, they took an approach of more resilience, of not going into a complete lockdown. That probably for some businesses was very good. For the retail business, however, I am not sure if that was the best decision, because as people are very responsible, and however, this was the first initial of the coronavirus. Yeah. So there was a lot of insecurity, a lot of unsafety. So people were not coming to the mall. So basically what happened is, we as operators, we had OpEx, but there was nearly no income. And then unfortunately, because of the events, yes, suddenly they got the second wave, which was much more serious. And eventually they are in a complete lockdown. So I think that going forward, what is very important to think here is that if you want to open up the malls properly, you need to give very good guarantees for the operators to be able to work, to give the safety to your employees, and to give the security and the safety to the consumers for them to come to the malls.
Yeah. So what is the current situation as we speak in Singapore and Malaysia? Are your stores closed again because of the second wave?
Yes, everything so far is closed in both the countries. They are in lockdown, and well, there is no clarity yet on opening dates. They are saying that, like in Malaysia, if I'm not wrong, because there are so much countries and so much times they are changing. But I think in Malaysia right now they were talking about half of May to open up, but there are talks that it probably will be prolonged again. So they are taking it day by day and seeing how it goes.
Yeah. So with that experience in Southeast Asia and what you were tracking in China, were you as a business prepared in the sense that you could see this becoming a global issue and that it would impact on your business in the UAE and indeed Portugal? And did it give you a sense of preparedness for that?
Well, yes. I mean, as far as you can prepare for something like this, which nobody can eventually, but as far as it was possible, yes, indeed. I mean, our learnings were on how governments reacted, how malls reacted. So we also saw different reactions from different countries. So it gives us some way of direction of how to address to malls and see how malls were going to operate. We had very clear inside our guidelines for safety for our employees. Another thing that maybe we won a couple of weeks was to start negotiating the orders for winter, to start reducing that and see how that we could organize on a proper way. So I think that were the main differences that we could take away from there.
Yes, yeah. You touched on your e-commerce business just very briefly, but be interested to hear more from you about how that side of the business has I guess picked up. What sort of extent have you seen an upswing in that business, and really how have you been able to cope with that? Because we're seeing a huge leapfrog in the development of e-commerce that takes us probably 2-3 years ahead of where we were.
You are completely correct. No, so right now with the entire store chain closed, the only engagement point where we are and where we can meet our customer is online, and precisely with our customer at home, they are much more connected. No, so talking with colleagues and comparing somehow, what you can see is that whoever was doing 4 to 8% of their turnover before COVID on online, let's say, which can be both e-commerce and marketplaces. What I have seen and what I hear from most of the brands is that there has been an exponential growth between 3 to 10 times the sales than previous the COVID. There is even I was in a webinar with someone from Inditex, Yassine. He's the GM of Inditex in Saudi Arabia, and he explained us that it was in Saudi Arabia it was even 14 times. So obviously this gives huge of stress to the operation, because if you have an operation to do 4 to 8% of your turnover through this channel, and suddenly this becomes 20 to 25% of your turnover, obviously here you have to be very agile, you have to be very flexible, you have to look to very good collaborations with other companies to be able to cope with that. And we also, what we did was a shift of our workforce. So suddenly you have workforce who is in standby, let's say, on somehow, and we could reinforce them, shifting them to the online business. Obviously, also there is another shift. The marketing, all the marketing campaigns, although they were already very much social media based, now they are even more social media based. Only social media based, to say it somehow, and obviously there is some more intention to drive traffic directly to the online stores now.
So how quickly did the business adjust to that huge shift to online, and as you say, to put everything and the systems in place and the collaborations you needed to deliver the best service you possibly could?
It is amazing, and I'm very proud of our company in that sense. How quick? Well, I assume, I don't know other companies how good they are doing or how they have done, but it's amazing to see how in real need how fast we can take decisions. No, I mean, in the end, we have indeed probably made a leapfrog of 3 years of what we were projecting of our turnover online in a couple of weeks, and we have been able to cope with that, which is amazing. No, this is obviously a great job from the entire team, and you have to be very agile and very flexible. And it's a couple of weeks. There is no time to lose, and it's all the efforts together, all the heads together, and everything and suddenly we make very quick decisions where otherwise we would be discussing maybe for months on if this is the best or that is the best. Now it's like, no, there's no time, and this is actually beautiful, a beautiful part of what has been done.
Yeah. So those incredible increases in demand from your online business, are you tracking that fairly evenly in all your markets, or have some markets really?
Yes.
It's just across the board. Yeah.
It is across the board. That's correct.
Yeah. Retailers around the world are looking for the first signs of when the lockdown in their particular countries are going to be eased, and while Singapore was held up for a lot of praise, unfortunately, as you said, they're now back in lockdown as they're battling the second wave. But interestingly, in the UAE, we're seeing that the government is allowing a partial reopening of the malls, and that you're able to open stores there in a remarkably short period of time. So can you talk through the process that you arrived at, or rather the government's arrived at, and how is that being managed? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I think here in the UAE, the government has been very proactive. They have taken measurements very early on where there actually were very few cases of coronavirus. For example, I think it was the country that was the first country to close down the schools, which was quite surprisingly for the society. But then afterwards, it definitely showed that it was the right decision. No. Secondly. So they took decisions very early on, and very good ones. Secondly, Dubai is or UAE, let's say, is a country which is also smart city advanced. So they have huge of technology for being a smart city, so they can control the city very well. They know which clusters there is more coronavirus or not. They have been doing lots of testing, so they have been able to monitorize the country very well, and they have gathered huge data, and this is what we can see now. So basically, then to go to the malls openings, few days before already, they had a very, very, very precise document of 15 pages who works into every detail of how the mall will reopen up and how shops have to be working now, which measurements have to be taken.
And how are consumers and shoppers reacting to this, these new ways of shopping?
Well, I think it's early to say, because the malls, we have just reopened them. What has happened is, since the start of Ramadan, they have eased somehow the lockdown here in the country, which means that people can now go for 3 hours to a mall. They can also go for an sports activity outside for 2 hours, and you can go visit your closest friends or family. So obviously, what's happening right now, people are visiting their closest friends and family, and they're going outside. I think that right now malls are maybe not yet on top of the list, and on top of it, as you mentioned before, we are in the Ramadan period, which is also somehow a different timing, no? So, but right now we will have to see. Obviously, for the consumer, they will have trust again, because right now, once they come into the mall, they are out of their comfort zone where they used to be in their comfort zone, because they are not very used yet to all these new norms. But gradually we will come, and the good thing is that people who go to the mall feel safe and say, like, look, the mall was not very full, I felt safe, and this will spread the word, and people will then probably gradually come back to the malls.
Do you feel that this is going to be the new normal? In fact, I know it feels like these are strict controls in place, not just in the UAE, but we're seeing it in food stores right around the world, the way that stores are now being set up. But I guess we initially felt this was for the short term, but that the people, I think, are now feeling we actually could see this for a lot longer in terms of the safety measures and the social distancing in the way that stores have to operate, and changing rooms being closed, etc. What's your sense, because you're right in the middle of a country where it is starting to ease slowly, the lockdown?
I think, well, obviously nobody has a ball to see it, but obviously if we look at what's happening, yes, this definitely looks at these measurements and this way of operating it will take some time, 6 to 12 months, and we will get used to that in the end. As human beings, we will be adapting to that. But yes, I definitely believe it's not something that will go away in the next 2 to 4 months, let's say.
Yes, yeah. And specifically thinking about your employees in the stores, what measures, because you're not a food business where they have unique ways of ensuring safety in stores because of the checkouts, etc. What can you do in a business such as yours to make the employees feel safe, which is equally important?
Well, indeed. I mean, our employees in the end are for us of the most important of our company. They are at the heart of our company, and assuring their safety is key. So, in addition to what the government has given as guidelines, we have also created our guidelines, and we have trained our people in these guidelines. No, so obviously you have to measure the temperature every day. You have the gloves, you have the mask and the fitting rooms. But then, in addition to that, we have made a guideline list of safety measurements, and we have published those, and they are visible in all our stores, so that our consumers, the customers, they also see what are the guidelines that our people are to follow, so that they feel comfortable with that too. No, so that is in the end a very crucial part, because if our employees will feel safety, our customers will also feel that safety is there. So in the end, that I think is what we have done additionally.
Yeah, yeah. Last question, Bart. You've seen a dramatic change in your business and the way your consumers are shopping with you. As we look, as you say, we don't have a crystal ball, but what is your sense on how much permanent change this is going to bring? And do you see, you talked about your e-commerce is 3 years in advance from where it was before the crisis. Are you anticipating this will be the structure going forward, and consumers as consumers living through this lockdown, some of the behaviors we've had will stay the same?
Well, I think that if we look first at what's happening, I mean, what is the change in social behavior today? It is that this crisis has impacted in a very hard way the entire society. That is the first definite thing that there is. No, and if you look at it, it has forced us to social distancing and to home working, but paradoxically, it has brought people closer together. So people now give much more importance to family, to friends. So that's one topic that is there to stay. If we look at the second thing, also, health now is much more important. Savings are very important right now. If we look in previous crises, in 2008 and 2001, when we were in the crisis, the opinion was that we will never go back to the normal situation. No, there will be a new normal. I prefer to say that we are going through a transition period, and yes, that obviously leads to a new normal. But this transition is some trends who were trends and are now going to be not trends anymore, but new habits. No, now digitalization, for example, it's a fact, and obviously people who previously preferred the offline, for them it was much more convenient, not being forced into the online business. Well, they have learned, and now the offline store cannot be the convenience anymore, because they have found convenience in the online. So digital has grown dramatically, and it will grow dramatically, and this is here to stay. This won't change anymore. Now, the offline. What happens with the offline? No, obviously, it will not disappear. There is no doubt that it will disappear. It might go. Previously, we were discussing maybe online, offline, 20%, 80%. Now it might go to 50-50. We don't know. But the offline is here to stay, because if you look also to what online players have done, like Everlane or Warby Parker, eventually their customers have forced them somehow asked them, we need to have the human touch, we need more engagement, and they were obliged to go to offline stores. No, so the offline stores will remain, they will have a different function, they will have to have a much more experience. Which one exactly is not clear. We will need creative people to create more experiences, to have a different view maybe from how the retail shop has to be, but it will always be there. And I think that it is a moment of change, and in moment of change there are also very good opportunities now, and we will have to be very alert for these opportunities.
Yeah. Bart, that's been fascinating, and really appreciate you sharing with us what you've been doing as a business, and the key lessons that you've got in your business that you can share with other retailers. So good luck with everything as things hopefully improve, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for the invitation.
That's all.